A warm good morning to one and all. Hope, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Every day is a new beginning. Today, Sri Krishnapuram V.T. Bhattadiripad College, UGC Stride Component 1 and Department of Computer Science jointly organizing a webinar, Introduction to Digital Signal Processing for Audio Signals. We all are here to become a part of this event. With prayers, let me begin the inaugural session. I am Bhavya PV, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science, and a member of UGC Stride Component 1. I am here to welcome you all to this inaugural session. Respected Principal of Sri Krishnapuram V.T. Bhattadiripad College, Dr. Jayan E., our respected Chief Guest, Dr. P.S. Sadi Devi Ma'am, Deputy Director, NIT Calicut, Dr. Sarita Nambudiri, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Computer Science, Ms. Shubha Iyen, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science, and to all who gathered here. I welcome you all to this session. Our chief guest, who has graciously consented to be a keynote speaker, Dr. P.S. Sadi Devi, Deputy Director, National Institute of Technology, Calicut. Along with her administrative responsibility, she is basically the professor in Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering, NIT Calicut. Moreover, she is a well-known speaker and eminent resource person in the area of signal processing. Ma'am, we are truly delighted with your presence. On behalf of UGC Stride Component 1 and Department of Computer Science, Sri Krishnapuram V.T. Bhattadiripad College, I welcome you, ma'am, to inaugurate the webinar and to deliver the keynote address. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhavya. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so respected Principal, Dr. Jain, Head of the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, and Advisor, Dr. Sarita, Conveners, Ms. Bhavya and Ms. Shubha, Coordinator, Dr. Parvati, faculty and staff of Sri Krishnapuram V.T. Bhattadiripad College, Palakkad, and most importantly, the participants of this program.
Ma'am,
Yes.
please, I have to welcome all other dignitaries.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, okay, ma'am.
Yes.
It's okay, ma'am.
Continue. You can continue.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. With her permission, I welcome all other dignitaries to this webinar. A great principle builds character, inspires dreams, encourages creativity, and builds confidence. It's none other than our principal, Dr. Jain Eranchedi Ilam, our beloved principal. On behalf of UGC Stride Component 1 and Department of Computer Science, for the formality, I welcome you, sir, with deep respect to this webinar.
Thank you.
Now, the person who puts her soul and heart in uplifting others, Dr. Sarita Nambudiri, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Computer Science, and Advisor of UGC Stride Component 1. With immense pleasure, I welcome you, ma'am, to this inaugural session. Your blessings and support encourage us, and it will always be needed to go ahead. Less like a colleague, more like a friend, a sister, my support, Ms. Shubha Iyen, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science. With immense pleasure, I welcome Ms. Shubha Iyen to this function to deliver vote of thanks.
Thanks, Bhavya.
Now I welcome all my colleagues, both teaching and non-teaching faculties of Sri Krishnapuram V.T. Bhattacharya College to this webinar. And now, participation is the key to success. On behalf of Department of Computer Science and UGC Stride Component 1, I proudly welcome all the participants, teachers, students, research scholars from other institutions to this function. Welcome you all. With this, I once again welcome you all to this webinar and especially to this inaugural function. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Now, Jain sir, our principal, it's over to you, sir.
I'm audible? Audible?
Yes, sir. Clear.
A very good morning to all. Respected Dr. Sadi Devi, PS, Deputy Director, National Institute of Technology, Calicut, Bhavya P. and Shubha Iyen, conveners and assistant professors, Department of Computer Science, Dr. Sarita Nambudiri, Head of the Department and Advisor of this program, Dr. Parvati KP, Coordinator, Stride Program, Redhi KN, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce and Assistant Coordinator, Stride Program, and other dignitaries and my dear students. All are welcome once again to this webinar on Introduction to Digital Signal Processing for Audio Signals. On this occasion, I appreciate the cordial spirit of the entire team of Computer Science and Stride Program, Stride Committee. In arranging this webinar, I extend my wishes for the success of the program. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Now, it's the time to inaugurate. Please, ma'am. Dr. P.S. Sadi Devi, ma'am, Deputy Director, National Institute of Technology, Calicut. It's over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. So good morning to you all. At the outset, let me thank the conveners and the coordinator for inviting me as the chief guest of the inaugural function of this webinar on Introduction to Digital Signal Processing for Audio Signals, organized by UGC Stride Component 1 in association with Department of Computer Science, Sri Krishnapuram V.T. Bhattacharya College, Palakkad. I sincerely appreciate and congratulate the coordinators, especially Ms. Bhavya, Ms. Shubha, and Dr. Parvati for organizing this webinar during this pandemic time. As we all know, the objective of any such program is to update the faculty, research scholars, and the students with the latest tools and technologies so that they acquire global competence, and also this will help them for contributing more to the society. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the coordinators for selecting a highly significant and a very relevant topic for this webinar, namely digital signal processing for audio signals. From the brochure, I can see that there are various topics, or this particular webinar will focus on signals and systems, an overview, then digital signal processing, introduction, signal processing perspective of Carnatic music, Then this tone identification and raga recognition using machine learning techniques, etc. As you all know, the application of digital signal processing to speech and audio signals are many, like speech and audio compression, speech recognition, speaker recognition or speaker verification, audio morphing, speech morphing, computational auditory scene analysis, that means separating the different speech signals or audio signals from a mixture of audio. Then time scale modification, that is either speeding up or speeding down a speech or audio signal. Then enhancement of speech, removal of noise, then modification of the speech or enhancement of speech for the, say, hearing impaired people, like that. Then content retrieval, retrieving, say, only that musician's voice from an orchestra. Like that, so many applications are there in the area of speech and audio, where the signal processing can do a lot of things. And if a hardware system is to be developed for any of those applications which I have mentioned now, we have to start with the algorithmic level implementation first, and then optimization of the algorithm for efficient hardware implementation, especially to reduce the cost, to reduce the power requirement, then area, the size of the product. So for this, that algorithmic level optimization itself is required for the designs. So I'm very sure that this today webinar will definitely help the participants to interact with the subject experts, as well as exchange your ideas among the other participants, as well as with the experts in signal processing, especially audio signal processing. So I request all the participants to say actively and seriously take part in all the discussions, attend all the sessions very seriously and meticulously during the next 2 days of this program. I'm sure that all of you will be highly benefited from this webinar. Once again, I congratulate the coordinators and the conveners and the Department of Computer Science, VTB College, Sri Krishnapuram, for organizing this webinar. I wish all success for this program and wish all the participants a happy and fruitful learning experience in the coming 2 days. Now, Bhavya, can I start the keynote speech now itself?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So now let me move on to my keynote address. So I would like to share the screen. Are you able to see?
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Full screen.
No.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Correct.
So today I am planning to mainly focus on 2 applications of signal processing in the area of speech and audio, mainly speech and audio compression as well as speech enhancement. So as I have already mentioned, the various applications of signal processing to speech and audio signals are, say, those are mentioned here. Speech coding or compression, mainly for reducing the storage requirement or the bandwidth requirement while transmitting speech from, say, one place to another place, for example, mobile communication. So there are either software or hardware implemented in all the mobile phones to achieve this. Then audio coding or compression, all of you are familiar with the MP3 musics. So that the compression of audio signals, again, in order to reduce the time required for uploading, downloading, etc. Then speech enhancement, for improving the quality of the speech for many applications. I will be mainly concentrating on audio coding and speech enhancement for the hearing impaired people, especially the aspects to be considered for digital hearing aid design. Other applications like speech recognition, recognition of the speech, speaker recognition, one area in which one of my students recently completed the PhD thesis is in forensic speaker recognition. So that means identification of the culprit from the recorded speech or from the transmitted speech. Then computational auditory scene analysis, as I have already mentioned, separating the various speech signals from a mixture of speech or audio. Then time scale modification, especially this will be useful for digital hearing aid applications, because many of the hearing impaired people will be finding difficulty in following a speech if the speed of the speech is very high. So many cases, some slowdown of the speech is required. So that is meant by time scale modification. Then voice morphing, mainly dubbing and all. Then voice encryption, that is for securing the transmitted speech, especially for military and other diplomatic applications. This encryption of speech is very important. And speech synthesis, for example, from the text, if it is to be converted to the speech, text to speech synthesis is widely used in many of the applications. So we will see mainly audio coding and speech enhancement in today's one. So, and the speech, audio coding as well as the speech enhancement, both are based on a particular tool known as wavelet transform. This is one area. There are many techniques for audio compression and speech enhancement, but I will be concentrating on applying this wavelet transform for compression as well as enhancement. So wavelet transform, just to introduce that, I will brief just a Fourier transform and short time Fourier transform. From that, we will switch to wavelet transform. So anyway, I think Fourier transform will be covered in your signals and systems session or digital signal processing session. So Fourier transform, as you all know, the uses complex exponentials as the basis functions, where it is e raised to j omega t. And the Fourier transform of any signal, say f of t. Now speech signal or audio signal is our f of t. In mathematics, that signal is nothing but a function. So function f of t is nothing but signal. So this can be a speech or audio signal. So we project that signal onto the basis functions, complex exponentials, and this omega we will be varying from, say, in the case of discrete domain or digital case, omega naught, omega 1, omega 2, omega 3, like that, the frequency of the complex exponentials will be varied. And if there is a large amount of correlation between the signal and the complex exponential of a particular frequency, say omega 2, then this integral f of t e raised to minus j omega 2t will be very high. That means say f omega 2. And it indicates that this the contribution or the presence of this particular frequency omega 2 is very high in f of t. So when you project this f of t onto various frequencies corresponding to omega naught, omega 1, omega 2, etc., if you get large coefficients, it indicates that those frequency components are present in f of t, and their strength is also, that strength is decided by the magnitude of f of omega naught, omega 1, omega 2, etc. Okay, so the Fourier transform coefficients are nothing but the strength of the various frequency components present in your signal. It can be speech signal or audio signal in our case. And the inverse can be obtained by using this expression. So if the signal does not have any spectral component at that particular frequency, the correlation will be very low or zero, or we will get a small Fourier transform coefficient or zero coefficient. So this is just an illustration. So say cos omega naught j omega 0 t. So we find the correlate. This is the signal, that blue color, and this is the basis function. So you correlate these two, and if you get large coefficient, it indicates that this particular frequency is there. Then you vary the frequency of the basis function. I'm going on increasing the frequency of the basis functions. And then whenever there is a correlation, then you will get large coefficients. And if those frequencies are not present, then we will be getting very small coefficients. Okay. So one example, we assume that you have a signal with the 5 hertz, another signal with the 25 hertz, another signal with the 50 hertz. You have 3 different signals of duration, say 1 minute or something. Then you take the Fourier transform. Now from this, it is clear that this is a single tone signal. It contains only 5 hertz, and that 5 hertz is present at all times. Similarly, 25 hertz is present throughout the signal, and 50 hertz present throughout the signal, and only a single frequency is present. So when you take the Fourier transform of first signal x1t, then I'll be getting just one coefficient at 5 hertz, and all the other coefficients will be 0. Second case, I'll be getting only 25 hertz. And in the third case, I'll be getting only one peak, that is at 50 hertz. And if you add those 3 tones, and I'm making a complex signal, because speech, audio, almost all the real life signals will contain lot of frequencies. So it will be, say, a sum of so many frequencies. So this is one example. Here, I directly add means at each time, for example, if you consider say 0.1 minute, here all the 3 frequencies are present. Similarly, anytime when you take, all the 3 frequencies are present, because I have directly added. And when you take the Fourier transform, then you will get 3 peaks, one at 5 hertz, other one at 25 hertz, and other one at 50 hertz, indicating that 3 different frequencies are present in the signal, and you will get this information. Now you consider another signal where instead, this is the first one, which we have already seen. Another one where I am concatenating the 3 signals. Say from 0 to 0.3, only 5 hertz is present. And from here to here, 25 hertz. And from 0.6 to 1, say 50 hertz. So this also contains 3 different frequencies, but all the frequencies are not present at all times. Low frequency is present only during this interval, and 25 hertz is present only during this interval, and 50 hertz is present only during this interval. And when you take the Fourier transform of this signal, then what do you expect? We expect 3 peaks, one at 5 hertz, one at 25 hertz, and one at 50 hertz. See, at 5 hertz, at 25 hertz, and 50 hertz, indicating that 3 different frequencies are present. Whether, so we got the 3 peaks in the other case also, but those 2 signals are entirely different. This is a signal which contains 3 different frequencies, but those frequencies present at all times. Whereas this is a signal which contains again the 3 different frequencies, but those frequencies do not exist at all times. So basically these 2 signals are entirely different, but in the Fourier domain, both will be containing 3 peaks, one at 5 hertz, other one as 25 hertz, and other one 50 hertz. And these ripples are mainly due to the transition from one frequencies to the other frequency. So the problem is with the Fourier transformers, this complex exponential, the main problem is they extend from -infinity to +infinity, and they analyze the signal globally, not locally. So it can tell only what frequencies exist in the entire signal, but cannot tell at what time instances these frequencies occur. So this is the main problem with the Fourier transform. So in order to obtain time localization, especially when you consider, say, biomedical applications like ECG, EEG, etc., where in a particular region there can be a spike or a discontinuity in the ECG signal, which is an indication of a particular disease, particular heart disease. So where exactly, in which wave, okay, in the ECG, whether it is in QRS complex or whether it is in T wave, that break is there, then we should be able to analyze where is that particular abnormality. For that, we need time localization of the spectral component, especially when there is a spike or when there is a break in the waveform, there will be some high frequency components. And when you use Fourier transform, it will show that some high frequencies are present in the signal, but whether they are in S wave or T wave, that information we won't get. And the doctors will not be able to say analyze it properly if it is not clearly visible in the ECG. So one solution or one say modification or upgradation on the Fourier transform, this short time Fourier transform was developed. There, instead of taking the entire signal and correlating with the complex exponentials, what is done is a small window is first taken and the signal is windowed. For example, if the signal duration is 1 second, let's say a 20 millisecond window is taken, and first it is say used for truncating the first 0 to 20 millisecond part of the signal. So the window is placed at t equal to 0, truncate the signal using this say 20 millisecond window, and then first 20 millisecond you compute the Fourier transform, and then slide the window to the next 20 millisecond. Like that, it is slided till it reaches end of the signal. And so in each 20 millisecond, what are the frequencies present? That information will be available from the Fourier transform domain. It is nothing but short time Fourier transform or windowed Fourier transform. So like this, a window is selected. It is placed at the beginning. So this portion's Fourier transform is taken, then it is shifted like this and until it reaches the entire signal. Okay, so this is basically that signal x of t is multiplied by the window. This is the window function, and then it is projected onto the complex exponentials of various frequencies, say omega 0, omega 1, omega 2, etc. So during the first interval, whether omega 0, omega 1, omega 2, etc. are there or not. Similarly, in the second interval, like that we will get. So some time localization will be available with this. But this is one type of window commonly used. And this particular operation, if I take this WT minus tau outside the bracket, so projection of x of t onto this product, WT minus tau e raised to minus j omega t. If I consider this is nothing but this window modulated by e raised to minus j omega t. And that modulated window will be like this. So actually we are correlating x of t with this one. Now when omega naught is changed to omega 1, then this number of cycles within this window will be increased. And if it is changed to omega 2, then more number of cycles in the same duration. So like that, the frequency of the basis functions are varied in order to check whether those frequencies are present or not. Okay, so now how to select the window size? As I have already mentioned, if I take 20 millisecond, now the requirement is, 1 minute, this window, see, suppose I select this as the width of the window, then this is the corresponding, say, basis function, say omega naught, and this is omega 1 and this is omega 2. Now, if this window doesn't cover one cycle of this waveform, then it won't give you a correct answer, or that means the accuracy in the frequency analysis will be very poor. So how will you select the window width? If the low frequency part of the signal is analyzed, then width of the window should be sufficiently large. But when you consider the high frequency part of the signal, width of the window should be sufficiently small. So this is the main problem with the short time Fourier transform. Okay, so narrow window will give you good time resolution. For example, in ECG, that spikes or discontinuity will be it will just come and go. It will be say 1 millisecond or 2 millisecond duration. So if that part is to be analyzed and to get that lot of high frequency components are present during that interval, I need a very narrow time window in order to get very good time resolution. But if very slowly varying part if we have to analyze, then at least one cycle of that part should be covered by the window. Then only the frequency can be measured, because frequency is number of cycles per unit time. So how many cycles are there within a particular interval, then only we can measure the frequency. So we need, for a slowly varying part or low frequency part, wider window, and for high frequency part, we need a narrow window. Now, in the case of short time Fourier transform, once the window width is selected, it cannot be changed. That is the main drawback of short time Fourier transform. And if you get very good time resolution, frequency resolution will be poor. And if you get very good frequency resolution, time resolution will be poor as per Heisenberg's inequality. So we cannot have simultaneously good time resolution and frequency resolution. But normally in any real life signals like speech, audio, biomedical signals, satellite signals, etc., the high frequency part like spikes or say transients will be occurring just for a small duration, and therefore we need narrow time window for high frequency signal analysis and a wider time window for low frequency components analysis. Okay, so this is for the short time Fourier transform, and we consider say different window widths, different windows are considered. Now you see very narrow window means from the time axis, if you left, there are clear demarcations between the various frequencies. But when you look from the frequency side, this say instead of getting what, there is some overlapping or a band. Now this is clear when you consider here that the time resolution decreases, and see here from this side it is better resolved in frequency domain, whereas when you look from the time domain there is overlapping, so that decreases. So wider window will give you good frequency resolution and poor time resolution, whereas narrow window will give you good time resolution and a poor frequency resolution. Okay, so narrow window, good time resolution, and wider window, good. So when do we need good time resolution and when do we need good frequency resolution? Okay, so in order to, so now we have seen that high frequencies are to be analyzed with a narrow time window and low frequencies are to be analyzed with a wider window. Now this wavelet transform is an alternative to short time Fourier transform, which will help us to analyze high frequencies using narrow windows and low frequencies using wider windows. So this works well if the signal to be analyzed mainly consists of slowly. Most of the real life signals are slowly varying, but some occasional high frequency bursts like discontinuity or spike or transients will be there. So the function used to window the signal is called the wavelet. Actually, it is a window function. The wavelet, which is known as the basis function in wavelet transform, which is nothing but a window function. Okay, now just with a single equation, I will explain wavelet transform. So wavelet transform is again projection of x of t onto a basis function, which is basically a window. Okay, so integral x of t psi t minus tau by s dt. And this is just a normalizing parameter, just you forget about that. And here, this s corresponds to scale. It is actually 1 by frequency. So low scale means high frequency. That means the basis function will be having high frequency, like omega 1, omega 2, omega 3, etc. Suppose omega 3 is the high frequency, highest frequency, then correspondingly S will be low. And S high means low frequency. So by varying S, we can change the width of the window. And for high frequencies, when S is changed in such a way that the basis function frequency is very high, then automatically this function becomes narrowed. And when S is changed, this width of the window will be changing. And for analyzing high frequencies, the width of the window will be decreasing. And for analyzing low frequency, width of the window will be increasing. So just for various scales, instead of omega, changing omega naught to omega 1, 2, 3, etc., we change this S from S0, S1, S2, S3, etc. And this is a scaling parameter, this S. So psi of t by 1, psi of t by 2, psi of t by 3, you know how the width of the window varies. Psi of t varies when it is t by 1, t by 2, t by 3, etc. Exactly this is taking place. Okay, so high frequencies, narrow window will be used. And when you go to low frequency or large scale, this window width will be automatic. So slowly varying part will be easily picked up by this large scale basis function, and high frequencies like transient spikes, etc., will be picked up by small scale, that means small value of S corresponding to high frequency. In this way, high frequency components will get good time resolution, and the low frequency components will be analyzed with the good frequency resolution. And this is the tiling diagram for wavelet transform. So you can see here frequency low, wider window, and when the frequency is increased, window width decreases. Again, when you go to high frequencies, the width of the window automatically adjusts. Correspondingly, the basis function width also you can see. Okay. So narrow window, narrow basis function, and a wider basis function. Okay. So this is what? Narrow, higher, and this is wider. So low frequencies with the wider window. Okay, now let us see the advantage of this one. And there are certain properties to be satisfied. You cannot use any function as wavelet function. Its average value should be 0. Integral psi of t dt should be equal to 0. And that function should have finite energy. Integral psi of t square dt less than infinity. Okay, I am not going much into those details. And these are some of the wavelet functions which satisfy those properties. And by varying the scale, automatically the width of the window will be changed. So a number of basis functions are available in the case of wavelet transform. Okay, so in the time domain, we will get only the sample values at discrete instance of time. In the frequency domain, we get only the frequency present in the signal, no time information. Here, no frequency information. Here, we will have time and frequency information, but width of the window, once it is fixed, it will be same for all frequencies, whether low frequencies or high frequencies, all will be analyzed with the same width of the window. But in this case, low frequencies will be analyzed with a wider window, and high frequencies will be, here frequency increases in this direction. High frequencies will be analyzed with the narrow window. So this is the advantage of wavelet analysis. Now, when we implement wavelet transform or short time Fourier transform, in the case of short time Fourier transform, for the implementation, we use filter bank with a uniform bandwidth, a bank of filters, but each filter bandwidth is same. So uniform filter bank. Whereas in the case of wavelet transform, we use non-uniform filter bank. The bandwidth of the filter increases as the frequency increases. So the width of the window will then automatically, it will be adjusted, because wider frequency window means narrow time window. So high frequencies will be analyzed with the narrow window, because a frequency response of any filter is nothing but the Fourier transform of the impulse response. So if the impulse response is narrow, means the frequency response will be wider, and the impulse response is directly related to the basis function. Okay. So then for implementing a binary tree structured filter bank is used in the case of wavelet transform. We have a set of high pass and low pass filters. So this is HN is high pass filter impulse response, and GN is HN is low pass filter impulse response, and GN is high pass filter impulse response. And this one is again iterated using the same low pass filter and high pass filter. then the low pass filtered output is again decomposed using low pass and high pass. So I'll be getting, say, a set of coefficients here, another set of coefficients here, another set of coefficients here, another set of coefficients here, where these coefficients correspond to the low frequency components, then slightly high frequency, like that. Okay, so in this way, the frequency of the coefficients increases. Now, audio coding, we come to the applications. So as far as audio compression or audio coding is considered, it is mainly for compressing the music signal or any audio signal, for reducing the storage requirement, as well as to reduce the time required for sending it over internet or either uploading or downloading. So normally the CD quality music, we usually sample at 44.1 kilohertz. That means 44,100 samples per second. And if it is stereo, then 2 channels, 16 bits per sample. Each sample 16 bits. That means 2 bytes. So total number of bytes required just for storing 1 minute song is around 10 MB. And if this is to be transmitted with over an internet with an average speed of 28.8 kbps, now the speed is high, but even then some Mbps, just to send 1 minute song, we require so many minutes just to upload or download. Okay, so we need some form of compression. And an MP3 or MPEG audio coding is a perceptual audio coding. That means we will be deleting certain part of the data. That means from the signal, some components will be deleted without affecting the perceptual quality. Such schemes are known as perceptual audio coding. So basically we will be losing some components, but that loss will not be affecting the fidelity or quality of the signal. That is known as perceptual audio coding. Minimizes the bits but high fidelity. And this is mainly achieved by exploiting the properties of the human ear, because in a music, there may be some components, if those components are deleted, it may affect the perceptual quality. So we should know what are the components perceptually relevant for the human ear and what are the components perceptually irrelevant for the human ear. So the signal processing of audio signal or the music signal should be done in such a way that, or the music signal should be analyzed so that the analysis should yield which are the components highly relevant or perceptually relevant for the human ear and which are the components not relevant for the human ear, or perceptually unimportant we can use with a few number of bits, or even though some components we can discard, it won't affect the hearing quality or the fidelity of the signal. So for that, the first step is you have the signal, okay, an orchestra, okay, that is recorded, that size will be very high because 44,100 samples, and if it is stereo means around that much, so many 10 MB will be there just for storing 1 minute. Normally the musics are of 5 to 6 minutes duration. So you can imagine how much say bandwidth is required for sending such a signal if you directly record and send it. So, but there may be lot of components which are irrelevant. So first step is modeling of the human auditory system. And in any music compression, the psychoacoustic model is an integral part. And all perceptual audio coders rely upon this particular model. So MPEG is also a perceptual audio coding standard. Okay, just very fastly I will run through this. So human ear mainly consists of 3 parts: outer ear, then middle ear, and inner ear is there, that I will show in the next diagram. So the sound when enters through this outer ear and it passes through this ear canal and as pressure wave in air, and when the sound impinges on this membrane known as tympanic membrane, that the tympanic membrane in the middle ear vibrates, and those vibrations will be passed on to the inner ear or cochlea through the various bonds, which you know, the smallest bonds in human body, malleus, incus, and stapes. Okay, this is the inner ear, cochlea, snail-shaped thing. And throughout this cochlea, there is a membrane, there is a fluid, and within that, this is the stretched form of cochlea. So there is a fluid, and over the fluid, on the surface of the fluid, there is a membrane. And this membrane cross-sectional area is not uniform. You can see here cross-sectional area is very high, whereas here the cross-sectional area is less. So that sound waves, that vibrations, when that vibrations are passed on to the inner ear, this fluid will start moving, or that will cause the fluid in motion, which will cause this basilar membrane. This is known as basilar membrane, that will vibrate. And that vibration, different parts of the basilar membrane will be resonating to different frequencies. Mainly these region where the cross-sectional area is more, that particular regions will be mainly responding or resonating to low frequencies, and this end of very low cross-sectional area or very small cross-sectional area will be vibrating to high frequency. So the resonant frequencies are high corresponding to this region, and here very low. Okay, then these frequencies, basilar membrane side, so many cells are there. So those vibrations will be transferred as say neural signal, and through this outer hair cells, that and through the auditory nerve, it will be interpreted by the human brain as different sounds. Okay, I'm not going much into the physiology of the human ear. So this is our interest, is mainly this. Okay, that vibration of the basilar membrane, not uniform throughout. So you can see that high frequency part will be mainly detected by this end, and the low frequency part will be mainly detected by the other end. So the high frequencies and low frequencies like this. And therefore, with this model of the human ear, or we can model the basilar membrane or the cochlea or the human ear basically as say like this. And these frequencies of the various parts of the resonant frequencies of the various sections of the basilar membrane are calculated by doing experiments by the psychoacoustic scientists. So they have measured, and say low frequency, say 100 hertz, then 100 to 200 hertz, this region will be mainly vibrating to these frequencies, then 200 to 300, like that. And when you go to high frequencies, you can see that this region will be mainly vibrating from 10 kilohertz to 15 kilohertz. So as the frequency increases, or if we represent these various sections as different, say, filters or different bands, you can say 0 to 100 hertz band, 100 to 200 hertz band, 200 to 300 hertz, like this here, 10K to 15K, 15K to 20K, because audible frequency range is up to 20 kilohertz. So we are not interested in frequencies above 20 kilohertz. So in any music signal, when you code it, you code only up to 20 kilohertz, because we know that above 20 kilohertz that human ear cannot hear. So we will be simply discarding those frequencies. So we are interested only up to 20 kilohertz. Okay. So ear can be now modeled. Ear analyzes the audible frequency range using a set of subbands, say 0 to 100, 100 to 200, or cochlea can be treated as a spectrum analyzer. This is the say conclusion. And the various bands are known as critical bands. And we can see that the critical bands are not equal, because here the bandwidth is 100 to 200 means 100 hertz. And when we come to here, say 1000 hertz to 2000 hertz means 1 kilohertz. Here also 1 kilohertz. But when you come to here it is 5 kilohertz. So as the frequency increases, bandwidth of the critical bands also increases. Or critical bands are narrower at low frequencies and wider at high frequencies. This is the property of the human ear. See, lower subbands, and as the frequency increases, bandwidth of the critical bands also increases. And the corresponding values are also given. And the psychoacoustic engineers, psychoacoustic researchers have identified 25 critical bands, and it extends up to 20 kilohertz only we are interested, but 22.05 kilohertz, up to that. So these are the various bands, and the center frequency of all the bands are also given: 50, 150 hertz, 250 hertz, like that. And the last one is 19.5 kilohertz, critical bands of the human auditory system. So one important property is human ear analyzes various frequencies with the different subbands. As the frequency increases, bandwidth of the critical bands also increases. That is one important property. Then another one is sensitivity of human ear to various frequencies. This is also experimentally determined, and this shows that the sound pressure level in dB, or say amplitude or the intensity of a particular frequency component, to be audible by the human ear. That is shown on the y-axis. So it is shown in decibels. So from this, it is clear that, say, consider 2 kilohertz. In order to hear a 2 kilohertz frequency component, audio component, minimum, say, some slightly greater than 0 decibels only is required, very low value. This is a reference thing is there, that reference is not shown here. Similarly, say 4 kilohertz, we require only very small strength, then that is audible. But when you come to, say, 12 kilohertz, you can see that this is the minimum strength. That means it corresponds to around 20 dB. So the strength of the frequency component required to be audible corresponding to 12 kilohertz, it is very high. Then similarly, when you go to 14 kilohertz, the strength is still more required, 40 dB. That means in order to hear high frequencies, the strength of the frequency component should be, strength means amplitude, which we can obtain from Fourier transform. Okay, so the strength of 14 kilohertz component in a music signal, if it is less than, say, 40 decibel, means it is not audible. So when you consider a music, just a recorded music, you take the Fourier transform, then you will get what are the frequencies present, and assume that there is a 14 kilohertz component. It may be, say, some instrument may be generating 14 kilohertz component. And if the amplitude or the strength of the corresponding Fourier transform coefficient corresponding to 14 kilohertz, if when it converted into decibels and all, if it is less than 40 dB, then it is not audible. That is the meaning of the sensitivity of human ear to various frequencies graph. It is nothing but absolute threshold of hearing in quiet. So there is no point in keeping that 14 kilohertz component whose amplitude is less than 40 dB in the music signal, because even if it is present, it is not audible. So why should we keep? You just discard it. It won't affect the quality of the music. So this is the idea. So all the frequency components whose strength is below this particular curve, absolute threshold of hearing in quiet, can be simply discarded without affecting the perceptual quality of the music signal. That is the meaning, okay, of this graph. So first thing is, take the Fourier transform of the music signal, which is already recorded, that orchestra, which is having very high size, large size audio, and then find the Fourier transform, calculate the strength of all the frequency components present, say up to 20 kilohertz, you can calculate, and then assume that if you consider, say, 1 second, there will be 44,100 samples. From that samples, nearly, when you take the Fourier transform also, you will get 44,100 coefficients. Out of that, some 30,000 samples, 30,000 Fourier transform coefficients may be having, corresponding to those frequencies, may be having strength below this particular curve. So you can discard all those 30,000 coefficients without affecting the perceptual quality. That is the meaning. So this graph will be very helpful for compressing the audio signal. Then another third property of the human ear is masking property. Masking property means one sound or one frequency component masking the another frequency component. For example, while I am talking, if a train passes by, then that train sound will be masking my sound. So if this particular scenario is coded, the people will be able to hear only train sound. So there is no point in keeping my speech or my voice in that particular recorded audio or recorded scene. So that can be simply discarded. This is known as masking. So in a music signal, when the musician is singing and the background, some instruments will be also played. So some of the instruments, certain frequency components may mask the musician's voice. So there mainly that instrument will be predominant, and therefore that coded part of the music by the musician can be discarded, which will help to compress the music. At the same time, it will not affect the quality of the music or the fidelity of the music. This is known as masking property. So these three are mainly used. So this is masking. See, when separately heard a particular frequency component, it may be above this absolute threshold of hearing in quiet. That means when there is no train, you are able to hear my voice. But when a train sound comes something like this, then it will mask my sound and you won't be able to hear. So such can be also identified from the music, which are the components that will be masked, and those components can be also removed from the music signal. Okay, and based on this, the coding can be done, and say this some masking threshold curves are obtained. So in depth, I am not because the time is nearly 11 o'clock. So I am say quickly going through. So by using this wavelet transform technique and the properties of the human ear, that audio coder, this is MBUG audio coder where short time Fourier transform is used. And then this is the basic psychoacoustic analysis will mainly help to identify the significant components, irrelevant components, etc. Using that, highly significant will be allocated with a more number of bits, and insignificant components will be eliminated, and less significant will be allotted with a less number of bits. And finally, we will get a compressed signal here, and it will be transmitted. And this MBUG audio coder, the bandwidth, it is based on short time Fourier transform, and equal bandwidth filters are used in the case of short time Fourier transform, and 700 Hz bandwidth of filters of 32 filters are used by the MBUG audio coder, and a signal which is a highly complicated signal because silent and then suddenly that signal amplitude increases. In such cases, MBUG audio coder gives a distortion known as pre-echo distortion. So this is highly annoying. Okay, this pre-echo distortion in MBUG standard is eliminated by using wavelet transform like this, and the bandwidths used by the wavelet transform varies as the frequency increases. You can see here bandwidth is 11 kilohertz, whereas here it is only 87.5 hertz. It is approximately the lowest critical band, that is 100 hertz. And you can see the result. See, no pre-echo. It is almost eliminated only at this point. So the quality of this one when using wavelet transform is very high compared to the quality of the MBUG audio coder, which uses short time Fourier transform. Because short time Fourier transform uses the same bandwidth for all the subbands, whereas human ear analyzes different frequencies using different critical bands with the different width. So wavelet transform analysis almost matches with the human ear analysis property, and that is why we get this less distorted output or no pre-echo distortion in the audio output. Okay, then I'll come to the next application, that also briefly, that is wavelet based speech enhancement. This is mainly for the enhancement of human speech, because our ears are mainly designed for hearing other person's speech, not for listening to music or any other, mainly for human speech. And as you all know, human speech mainly lies within the range 300 hertz to 3.3 kilohertz. Whereas audio means 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. But within that, human speech lies in the range 300 hertz to 3.3 kilohertz. And from the previous diagram, you have seen that human ears are very sensitive to this. See, in this range, say 2000 hertz to 4000 hertz, there is a dip in the graph. That means very small amplitude is required for these frequencies to be audible. And most of the human speech components also lie within this particular range. So our human ears are mainly designed for hearing other person's human speech. Okay. So that hearing impaired people, approximately 7.5% of the world population has some degree of hearing loss, and about 1% has a loss that is moderately severe or greater. And two commonly seen hearing impairments are, one is known as conductive deafness and the other one is sensory neural deafness. So now let us see how this signal processing application or signal processing will help us to design a hearing aid which can be used for both types of hearing impairments, that is conductive deafness as well as sensory neural deafness. So conductive deafness is mainly caused by the degraded transmission of the acoustic energy to the cochlea, and it can be modeled by a linear distortion. That means while passing the signal from the middle ear to the cochlea, almost all the frequency components will be attenuated by the same amount. That means all frequency components are affected in the same manner. Then all the frequency components should be amplified by that particular amount. And this type of deafness is known as conductive deafness. There, all the frequencies are affected in the same way. And almost all the analog hearing aids available today, where whatever be the signal, just amplify the signal by a particular amount. So this will work if all the frequency components are affected in the same way by that particular person. Whereas sensory neural deafness means the different frequency components will be affected in different manner, and this impairment is mainly caused by prolonged or excessive exposure to noise. That means those who are working in railway stations, airports, etc., or in say industries where always continuous exposure to noise, then due to aging, and then some hereditary factors also will be causing this particular deafness. So here all frequency components are not attenuated by the same amount in these patients, whereas in these patients all frequency components are affected almost in the near manner. So this one, see here, these are that x-axis shows the various frequencies and y-axis shows the hearing loss in decibels. Here you can see that this is almost a constant line. Okay, here there is a dip. That means most of the frequencies are attenuated by almost the same value. So in order to hear all these frequencies, this you may have to, above this particular graph, it should come. That means this should be shifted upward, say to this position. That means amplification. So almost all the frequencies have to be amplified by almost the same value. So that simple amplification, linear amplification of the signal will be sufficient, and that is what is done in analog hearing aid. But the automatic gain control is there. In some people that gain may be say 100, but in some people the gain required may be say 200. In some people it may be 50. So that control will be there, but almost the same gain for all the frequencies. Whereas in sensory neural deafness, you can see that say this 250 hertz, only this much loss is there. Whereas in the case of this is 5 kilohertz, the loss is more. So if the loss is more, amplification required is more for this frequency. Whereas when the loss is less, correspondingly amplification required is also less. That means the different frequencies require different number of or different gains in order to compensate for the hearing loss. So this is highly varying hearing loss. Left ear as well as the right ear are shown. In both cases, that and normally the hearing aid will be put only in one ear where that comparatively better ear. If the loss is too high, then the doctors won't prefer hearing aid for that particular ear. So whichever is better to that ear. So from this, whichever loss is less, but different frequencies need different amplification. These two types of deafness are there. So a hearing compensation algorithm using this digital signal processing technique, which provides compensation for both types of hearing losses, is designed, and this is based on, again, wavelet transform, that is speech signal or the audio signal is divided into various frequency bands matching to the common audiogram standard, because we have seen that human ear analyzes different frequencies with the critical bands and it is not uniform. So a uniform bandwidth filters won't be sufficient, or it won't be suitable for analyzing and designing such a compensation algorithms. So we go for wavelet transform. Signal is sampled at 22.05 kilohertz and signal is decomposed using 5-level discrete wavelet transform like this. So 0 to 11.11 kilohertz sample frequency divided by 2 will be the actual signal frequency. So it is divided into 0 to 5.5 kilohertz and 5.5 to 11. Then 5.0 to 5.5 is divided into 0 to 2.75 and 2.75 to 5.5. Like that, these are the various subbands 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this particular band will be amplified by a gain which is required or which is calculated based on the loss, hearing loss in this particular band for a particular person. Similarly, the loss in this particular band is obtained from the audiogram and the corresponding gain is applied for all the coefficients in this band. So CA5, these are the coefficients in this band that may be multiplied by say 20 and this may be multiplied by 50 depending upon the loss, whereas these high frequencies will be multiplied by 100 or 200 as per the loss corresponding to this band corresponding to a particular patient. So in this way, the hearing aid is designed. And the wavelet coefficients represent the subband samples in the frequency range. And the gain or that in some cases, instead of amplification, attenuation may be required. There are certain patients, if you speak loudly, then they usually reduce the voice rate because it may be annoying for them. So in some cases, attenuation may have to be applied. So for gain or attenuation factors for each band can be calculated depending upon the actual intensity of the signal in that band and the actual hearing loss of the patient in that band. Based on that, the calculations are done and the corresponding discrete wavelet coefficients are modified, and then inverse wavelet transform is computed for getting the modified signal for the hearing impaired. So that will be the hearing aid output. Okay, so my mainly concentrated on these two applications. So thank you. Any questions? Because of this lack of time, only this much I could explain. Hello, any questions?
Dear participants, now you can ask, interact with our chief guest.
Or
if you have any query, you can raise your hand.
if not now, then I have given my that email ID. You cannot. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
2 email IDs are given. That
Yes,
also is possible, but just mention that you were a participant for this particular webinar. In that way also you can interact. I am happy to clarify the doubts now itself. Okay, if anything is there. Any questions?
Queries, you can now ask.
And Bhavya, what's the background of the participants? Are
Uh,
they
Majority
electronics
are research scholars,
scholars in?
computer science, and some are from electronics background, and
Okay.
assistant professors from electronics and computer science background.
All are familiar with signal processing background, all with the signal processing background.
I think computer science background
Okay.
are not much knowledge
Ah,
in any
okay.
particular area. I
Now
think.
this, my one of the students worked in forensic speaker recognition, mainly that she employed this neural network techniques also, machine learning techniques and forensic speaker identification. Mainly for identification, prediction, etc. machine learning techniques would be very useful.
Yes, ma'am.
In these two, compression and the enhancement, that machine learning techniques are not applied. That's
Thank you, madam. Thank you for your valuable suggestion and for such a valuable keynote address.
thank you.
It's included all the key concepts that we want to know and we want to implement. Thank you once again, ma'am.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much and all the best to all the participants and the coordinators. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, can I leave now?
Oh, okay, ma'am. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Now, our head of the Department of Computer Science, Dr. Sarita Nambudiri, ma'am is not joined with us. Unfortunately, she came across with a travel, an urgent travel. That's why she can't join with us now. I am sure that her blessings and support will be always with us. So I move on to Ms. Shubha Iyen, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science, to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, Shubha teacher. Mute. You are, please unmute.
Thank you, Bhavya. Respected Principal Dr. Jain sir, Honorable Chief Guest Dr. Sadi Devi ma'am, and all the delegates from various colleges and from our college also. As a member of Computer Science Department, I would like to thank, or I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our Chief Guest Dr. Sadi Devi ma'am for the valuable or enlightening speech and for spending her valuable time with us in her busy schedule. I would like to express, or Dr. Jain sir, our principal, we are grateful to you, sir, for the wholehearted support given by you, sir. Our beloved HOD, Dr. Sarita Nambudiri ma'am, I would like to express the thanks or to you, ma'am, for the guidance given by you to conduct the webinar. My sincere gratitude to all the delegates who are present here. I would like to thank the whole computer science department for the support. And I would like to thank UGC Stride team also for providing this webinar. And once again, thanks all of you present here, and have a nice day or nice technical session ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we are about to begin the first session with